Hi, Lorna. How are you?
Good, Douglas. How are you?
Oh, doing just fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, no problem.
Your book is called Mitch Marner. Is that the book you're promoting?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's part of my amazing hockey story series.
Okay, so you have to be Canadian then.
Hey, I can be from Vegas and like hockey.
No, you couldn't. You have to be Canadian.
Yeah, I'm Canadian. I am Canadian. I'm from Edmonton. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, which, by the way, is probably a lot colder than Vegas is today.
Oh, I'm sure of it. So, why is hockey synonymous with Canada? Is it? It's like baseball to America or football, but every Canadian I've ever run into, regardless of their age, gender, political affiliation, hockey is the thread that weaves the social fabric of Canada, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon. I don't know why, because I think lacrosse was actually one of the first sports. But hockey has just become very, very Canadian. And you're correct. I mean, everybody talks about it. Everybody loves it. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to watch. They want their kids to play. So it is a really interesting phenomenon that happens in Canada. It is our sport. And we have other sports, of course, but hockey is the one that everybody seems to talk about.
Okay, can I bring up another Canadian sport just real quick? One that
Sure.
I totally don't understand, and that's curling.
Yeah, curling's another Canadian sport. Let's face it, we have the cold weather up here. We are north. We are the north, and we do have the colder weather. So I think that sometimes that is synonymous with what happens with hockey and curling is that there's options there because there's ice. I mean, especially
Okay.
with hockey, kids play outdoors all the time. It's sort of like kids in the States will go to the basketball court or will go on the baseball field. Well, kids in Canada go to the ice rink during the winter, the outdoor ice, because we have outdoor ice. And curling is just one of those sports that it's just sort of taken over in Canada, and it's been a really interesting one. And again, I guess it's because we have so many arenas for people to curl in.
Okay, so is curling like shuffleboard on ice?
It's really interesting because I went to the Sochi Olympics and I went to watch all the curling, and I'm not a curler. So, I mean, I played hockey, but I'm not a curler. So I was watching all the curling, and people were beside me, and I kept asking them questions about the rules and what was going on, and why wouldn't they hit that? Why wouldn't they hit that one? So there was definitely a strategy involved, like shuffleboard, where you want to clear the board or not clear the board or block, or there was all these things that had to be done in curling, and I was just learning the rules as I was watching. It was really fascinating. So yeah, I guess you could maybe say that. Now maybe a curler might come on and say, no, that's not true. But it is sort of like a shuffleboard game. It's a lot harder than everybody looks, though. I did it in high school once in phys ed, we did curling as an option. And I remember doing it then, and it was actually harder than what it looked.
Well, you do have to kind of chuck those things down the ice. Shuffleboard is just a little puck, right?
Yeah, they're heavy.
Yeah,
Those rocks are heavy, and it's strategy.
right, because you've got to knock one out and keep yours in or something like
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of strategy involved.
Okay. So your book is about Mitch Marner. Is this a biography of him?
It's a children's book. It's a children's book probably for ages, I want to say like 5 or 6, 7, all the way up until 12. Because let's face it, there's a lot of young boys who play hockey, who play sports, who don't necessarily read as much as they should, as far as I'm concerned, but they're busy, right? They're off playing hockey, they're off playing their sports, so it can go right up into till that age, and it is a biography. It includes text, so there's quite a bit of text for reading. There's also photos, like real life photos, but there's also, this is the special part of these books are in this book is the graphic section. So I've sort of woven 4 sections of graphics into the book, and there's 4 pages of graphics in each one of those sections. So it weaves and it's chronological. So it does follow the story, the storyline and the age line of the players. So those have been actually really, really fun to put in. I don't do the illustrations. D.A. Bishop does the illustrations for the graphics, the comics, which is fabulous, and Scholastic publishes the books. But they're combinations, so they're just a little bit of a hybrid, I guess you could call them.
Okay. Is he like the big superstar in Canada for hockey?
You know what he is? He plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and this series is called the Amazing Hockey Series. So the first book I started a book on Connor McDavid, and I wrote it when Connor was fairly young, just sort of becoming captain of the Edmonton Oilers. And then I wrote a book on Hayley Wickenheiser, who obviously is our female player. And then I did a book on PK Subban, a defenseman. And now I did Mitch Marner. And I think when I pick the athletes, and when Scholastic, I work with the team there, and we discuss the short list as to who, should be the next athlete. We don't necessarily pick the superstar, but we do pick an athlete who has made a contribution as well to the world, to society. And Mitch is a really, really good hockey player. He has a really good story because he was very small, and he got told over and over and over again as he was growing up, you will probably never be a hockey player, because he was small and he didn't grow at the same speed as some of the other boys. They were getting bigger. And in fact, there was even a point where he was playing, and he was always playing above his age group. And then there came a point where the boys got really big, and he decided to play with his age group because of his size. So there were some things in his career that I look at, and I looked at, and I thought, this is a story about perseverance as much as it is a story about a fantastic hockey player. The other thing is that he gives back. And I think that that's really important. He has the Mitch Marner Assist Fund, and he's done, tournaments in the summer to raise money for various charities. And that's really important as well when I'm looking at the books, like to sort of find that amazing hockey story, like what is it, and what is it all about. And that's another reason why I picked Mitch Marner to write about.
Okay. Are the teams co-ed now? Are women playing with the men, or is it separate?
In the NHL?
Yeah.
No. Where did you come from?
Well, I'm American. What do I know?
No, they don't. No. No, the NHL is still all male,
Okay.
but there are there was a female professional league, and they were playing. They're trying to revive it, so hopefully it does get a little bit of revival. I think actually that the fact that the U.S. women won the last Olympics was pretty helpful with that as well, because that means that there's more young girls playing in the USA as well as in Canada, which is just that much better for the sport.
Is there a difference in the two games? Different rules?
Yes, absolutely. So the men still hit, and the women body checking, and the women don't body check. So that is definitely a big difference in the game. The women's game it's really fast, but they don't body check. And when I played years ago, we were allowed to body check as girls. We were allowed, that was part of our game, but they took that out of the women's game. And when the first 1990 Women's World Hockey Championships were on in Canada, it was the very first one that they'd ever had. It was in 1990, and there was body checking in that tournament. It was the very first International Ice Hockey Federation Women's Worlds Championships, and Canada and US battled off at the end, and there was body checking then, but they took the body checking out for women. So that is a big difference in the two games. Now, girls do in Canada, and I think still in the States too, girls do play with boys at a minor hockey level, because sometimes they're in a small town and there's not enough players for the girls team, for a full girls team, so they will, I should call it female, I guess, female team. They would play with the boys. Some of the females will play with the boys.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that Mitch was small in stature for a hockey player. I
Hmm.
have no reference point to what a hockey player size should be. I mean, I know that basketball players need to be at least 6.5 feet tall, and football players can be just as big as they want. But what is like a normal size for a male hockey player?
Well, I think that if you're 6 feet and over, that's very, very helpful. There's a lot of players who come in at 5'11", but then now Mitch is growing. I mean, he has come to be of a decent size now. It was when he was in his minor hockey that he was slight. And I think that's probably a better word for it. He was very slight, and he sort of like weighed in at 135 pounds, and other players are playing at 170. For the NHL, players like anybody who's sort of about 5'7", 5'8", 5'9", they're considered to be a smaller hockey player.
Okay.
There's lots of players who come in about 5'11", but then there's those that are big, like that are in their 6'2", 6'3", and then there's Chara, who plays for Boston Bruins, who's like 6'5" or 6'6" or something. He's huge. So there are bigger players, and over 6 feet is where it sort of works.
Okay, and weight-wise, most hockey players are not fat that I've noticed. It's hard to tell with all the pads on, but they seem to be really pretty buff. I mean, pretty ripped. Yeah.
Yeah, they have really big legs and really like big butts.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they do. They do a lot of glute work and a lot of
Oh, okay.
thigh and hamstring work for the skating, right? So they tend to be, yeah, they're very big lower bodies, a lot of them. Not all of them, though. Like you even look at Connor McDavid, like he's tall and he's fairly lean. Like he's not like a big, huge guy, whereas Sidney Crosby tends to have a fairly, like he's got a really thick legs, and he's definitely heftier, stronger that way. So they're all different, but yeah, it's interesting, right? Different bodies for different sports, and how
Sure.
that all comes
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to show my age by saying this, but the last hockey player that I remember being like real superstar status was Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
So that I know I'm
Yeah.
showing my age, but okay.
Well, Wayne was a superstar. Wayne was just a phenomenon. And there's a guy who came in because I actually wrote the Edmonton Oilers book, Grit and Glory. And so I did a ton of research, and had a conversation with Wayne about his playing career, and to be able to add stories into the book. It was a 40th anniversary book, and I went through all the archival photos. And when he came in, he wasn't very big at all. In fact, one of the players who was older, more of a veteran on the team, he said he saw this 17-year-old kid come in, and he was just like, gosh, and his line was, it was really funny because he says, he's not even as big as Celine Dion. Like he was kind of like, he was,
That's funny.
that was, anyway, it's a funny line, and I managed to put it into the book because it was Al Hamilton, and he was an older player. But Wayne came into the dressing room just this slight little 17-year-old who, when he took his padding off, he wasn't very big at all. So he wasn't actually a huge player. He was just a phenomenal playmaker, and just brilliant with seeing the ice and where the puck could go on the ice, and who to pass to. So he was a brilliant hockey player. So he's still the great one.
Yeah. Well, I think there's room for both. I mean, I'm no hockey expert, but it seems like you'd almost like football. You want the big guys to kind of block and protect, and the small guy could skate very fast and move down the ice very quickly. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. And I think in Wayne's day, probably the last time, you maybe watched a hockey game, there was more of that because they didn't call as many penalties. So you would get a big guy like Dave Semenko, who, has passed away, but was sort of Wayne's protector. Wayne had some of those protectors on the ice with him. The coaches were very strategic that way, that, he had players who would do the blocking, and then that allowed him to go through. It still happens today, except for there's more penalties in today's game, and there's much, so it's a little bit harder, and there's more suspensions. So, players don't want to get caught in that position because they don't want to be out for 5 games. Like, they don't want to make a hit where they're out for 5 games or 3 games or 2 games. So there is a little more caution today in the game.
Well, I looked at the picture of the cover, and I looked at some pictures of Mitch, and I'm really glad that the hockey players now wear masks, because I remember having the producer and writer on of the movie Goalie, the Terry Shawchuk story.
Yeah.
And when you looked at that picture of Terry Shawchuk's face, it was unbelievable that those people back then wore no masks.
Crazy. No helmets.
No helmets.
No masks. No
right.
helmets.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't wear helmets. Like, if that puck hit them on the side of the head, wow. Like, yeah, I agree. I think that helmets are really important, and I think that they're very, very important in the minor hockey stages. And a good helmet that fits well is really important for parents to get. For sure.
I mean, Terry Sawchuk's face looked like he put his head in a chipper shredder. It really was unbelievable,
Yeah, no, those days were, and they all had the broken noses.
Yeah, his nose
They all
went
had
this
those
way.
noses that were broken.
His nose went sideways, and
Yeah, and that was the sign of a hockey player. Like, there was always jokes about that, right? Like, there were always Canadiana jokes about, how can you tell a Canadian is someone who has a broken nose or whatever, crooked nose. Yeah. I mean, it's a good sport, though, and it's branched off into the States and does well in the States. Like, there's lots of good cities who are very, very, keen and have, like, really strong fans and have, like, a huge fan bases in different states, cities in the States, and in Canada, of course.
We do have to wrap this up. Do you have a website you want to give
Yeah, I
out?
do. It's www.lorna, and that's LORNA, and Schultz, SCHULTZ, Nicholson, NICHOLSON. And the book is on my website, right center, front and center right now, as a new release, as the release that's just been out. And you can look at it from there and check it out.
Okay, is it .com or .ca?
.com.
.com. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Lorna, thanks so
.com.
much for coming on, and I can't believe we spent actually 15 minutes talking about hockey. I never thought I could do that. So thank you. There's something new for me today.